1,300,000 soldiers, 4,000 tanks, 2,500 units of light armored vehicles, 50 missile systems, and almost 100 submarines. All this makes the DPRK Army one of the most numerous and powerful in the world. By comparison, the United States has 50 to 60 attack submarines according to various estimates, while Russia has about 70. Of the country's 25 million population, almost 10 million citizens of both sexes are ready to join the armed forces if necessary. 5% of the country's population is in military service. There is no such indicator even in Israel, where girls also serve in the army. In addition, the North Korean army is the most closed and secret. How, despite the sanctions of North Korea, is it possible to maintain one of the most combat-ready armies and create modern weapons? What are North Korean troops armed with? Where can Pyongyang's intercontinental missiles reach? What is the basis of North Korea's military power, fanaticism, or professionalism? Today, we will reveal all the military secrets of one of the most mysterious countries in the world. Sit back and enjoy watching. Let's go. The Korean People's Army, so officially called the Armed Forces of the DPRK, is the most classified in the world. Its exact number does not know anyone according to approximate data. As we have already said, it is about 1,300,000 soldiers, and another 4 million are in the mobilization reserve. But let's go in order. Where does any military special operation begin? Of course, with intelligence, and it is the special forces that determine the outcome of any war. What is the North Korean Special Forces? Let's start with the fact that the North Korean Special Forces are outnumbered by the Special Forces of the United States, China, or Russia. For 25 million people, there are more than 120,000 special forces who are trained to neutralize the enemy with any means at hand, and even with their bare hands. North Korea's Special Forces training program is as severe as possible. No mirage and only full contact during training. Each fighter learns a rich arsenal of techniques of the Korean martial art of Taekwondo to break a wall with a fist or break the neck with the edge of the palm of the hand. All this can be done by a Special Forces from North Korea. Another aspect of Special Forces training is psychological training. Any North Korean Special Forces soldier will give his life for the motherland without a second thought. Suicide bombers with portable nukes are shown at military parades. In addition, the excellent psychological training of soldiers is evidenced by one case. Have you ever heard of the Gangnam incident? In 1996, a submarine of the DPRK Navy, during reconnaissance, got into an emergency situation. The engine stalled and the submarine was carried to the shores of South Korea, where it ran aground. North Korean sailors decided to make their way to their own by land. The enemy staged a real hunt for them, which lasted as long as 49 days. 26 crew members bravely endured all the hardships, and almost all chose death over captivity. Only one sailor fell into the hands of the South Korean military, but it is unlikely that even the most trained North Korean Special Forces soldier will be able to stop an American tank with a chokehold. So let's check the strength of North Korea's armored vehicles. If you carefully study the best examples of armored vehicles, there is no doubt that military engineers in the process of their development were inspired by the Soviet machines. And the basis was taken far from the most modern examples of Soviet tanks T-54 and T-62. But there are rumors of their own models that are covered with secrets and increased secrecy. Let's not guess whether they really exist and consider the most famous models. The first in line is Cheonmaho. Despite such a mysterious name, is based on the painfully familiar Soviet tank T-62. It is fair to say that in the process of its development, the model passed 5 stages of modification. Pumping began with the installation of laser rangefinders and dynamic reactive armor about it. A little more detail. The tank armor was protected with special containers with explosive substance. When a shell hit such a container, it exploded, thereby destroying the enemy ammunition. Such armor is 10 times lighter than steel. 1 square meter weighs only 400 kilograms, while a square meter of steel as much as 4 tons. Only there is one nuance explosion occurs on the armor itself, which clearly does not benefit neither the tank nor the crew. So in the third modification of the tank was given an armored skirt from RPG in composite armor. It is a super strong steel alloy containing combined uranium, ceramics, and Kevlar. Layers of composite are packed between the plates of the main armor, and it turns out a kind of sandwich. Such protection is quite effective against RPGs, which is not the case with anti-tank guided missiles. Another defense element of the Cheonma-ho tank is smoke masking. Its disadvantage is that the veil is made not of aerosols but of exhaust. It is unlikely that such masking will save from laser beam guidance. According to military experts, some copies of the Cheonma-ho have thermal imaging and ballistic calculators. Such an upgrade allows you to see the enemy at night and during the day, to find him even in impenetrable thickets or detect him at a great distance. As for the calculators, they increase the accuracy of fire and speed up the aiming. North Korea has about 1,000 of such vehicles, but much more interesting are Pokfung-ho, tanks developed on the basis of the Soviet T-72. At one time, North Korea bought from the Soviet Union several copies of the T-72, which became the basis for further development of its version of the Soviet tank. Improvement of the Soviet military machine began with the installation of a powerful firing module. Its basis is a large caliber machine gun, Vladimirov caliber, 14.5 millimeters. It was developed by Soviet gunsmiths during the Great Patriotic War. Despite the past years, this weapon remains very effective. Rapid-fire machine gun is also an excellent armor-piercing and even anti-aircraft guns. The cannon used here is the Soviet Tu-46 gun of 125 mm caliber, but it is not suitable for launching missiles, and the Koreans had to take it outside as in BMP-2. As for missiles, the North Korean military for their tank developed an analog of the Kornet or Faget missile system. From the old Soviet models, there is only a night combined sight and passive active guidance system. There are about 600 such tanks in the North Korean army, but how effective will they be on the battlefield? What are their weaknesses? First of all, there are a lot of questions about electronic components. The presence of thermal imaging cameras on North Korean tanks does not mean that they have a high range and resolution, and the situation is the same with computing components, which even China cannot help North Korea with. But we should not forget that the number of North Korean heavy armored vehicles is not limited to these two models of tanks. A horde of 2,000-old Soviet T-55S, T-62S, and their Chinese modifications will cause a lot of trouble for the enemy. But that's not all. Does North Korea have its own modern tanks? In recent years, Pyongyang has taken up the development of a new main battle tank. Western analogs have given it the name M2020. Recognizing features of the American Abrams and Russian Armata. It is known that this is the first North Korean armored vehicle to be protected by an active defense system. North Korean engineers place anti-tank and anti-aircraft missile systems on each tank to provide greater firepower and better air protection. Because North Korean doctrine has always stipulated that they will have to fight in conditions of enemy air dominance. Although the North Korean Air Force is quite numerous with more than 1,000 attack helicopters and airplanes up to the MiG-29. But there are not enough qualified pilots, and in case of necessity there will be no one to take an airplane into the air. By the way, did you know that on the border with South Korea is the village of Kijeongdong, built to show the southern neighbors the attractiveness of life in the northern part of the country? It was built in the 50s at a time when electricity in the countryside was a luxury on both sides of the border. The light was lit strictly on a schedule. And in the same rooms, soldiers roamed the streets, and the same women for 15 years washed the same windows. Later, when technology allowed southerners to see the village better, it became immediately clear that the houses in Kijeongdong were just empty boxes with no floors, ceilings, or partitions. And finally, we come to the most interesting thing. What do we know about the artillery of the North Korean army? The DPRK military uses Soviet artillery systems. They have an almost bottomless supply of hail rockets. All this is complemented by an untold number of mortars and ammunition for them. In general, North Koreans pay special attention to artillery. Guns are even in service with coastal units. The most striking representative of North Korean barrel artillery is considered to be the Koksan unit. The caliber of the shell reaches 170 mm. Such a shell is not in service with any other army. The Soviet Union helped North Korea to develop its artillery. The first guns were supplied to Pyongyang in the 1940s, and North Korean designers used them to build their own analogs. But to this day, Soviet-made guns remain the basis of the artillery fleet. For example, the powerful ML-20 howitzer is a rare weapon that fires both on a trajectory like a cannon and on an overhead trajectory like a howitzer. But most impressive of all is the North Korean rocket artillery. It is the most powerful and long-range in the world. This multiple launch rocket system, KN-09 caliber, is 300 mm like a Russian tornado, and such an installation hits a record 220 kilometers. But no matter how powerful and modern armored vehicles and artillery are, they are often not the ace in the hole that allows you to dictate your terms to the enemy. And then it comes to nuclear weapons. What can the North Korean army boast of in this regard? The production of nuclear weapons in the DPRK is put on the stream. Every month from 5 to 8 ballistic missiles come off the assembly line. Let's look at the most effective samples from the nuclear arsenal. Warhead Hwayson 8, which flies at a speed of more than 6,000 kilometers per hour, is difficult not only to intercept, but even to detect. It is interesting that the North Korean military in the development of hypersonic weapons even surpassed the Pentagon, which conducted a test of its ballistic missile much later. According to military experts in the development of nuclear weapons, North Koreans helped China. But the military industry did not stop at the achieved results. Recently, the North Korean military tested a new missile Hwasongpo-16, which was an unpleasant surprise for South Korea. This hypersonic missile medium long range received a poetic name Blooming Fortress. The warhead reached an altitude of more than 100 kilometers, flew and accurately hit the target. To achieve such a range was achieved by replacing the liquid fuel on which flew previous missiles, solid fuel. According to experts, the maximum range of the Blooming Fortress is 6,000 kilometers. The list of classified missiles of North Korea continues the intercontinental ballistic missile Hwasong-17. The test was held 2 years ago, where the missile rose to an altitude of more than 6,000 kilometers and flew more than 1,000 kilometers. Many people wonder how a far from rich country manages to constantly improve its nuclear arsenal and remain among the leading nuclear powers. The answer is very simple. What allowed the war-ravaged and weakened Soviet Union to create the atomic bomb shortly thereafter was an external threat and perfectly working intelligence. Well, and what war of the 21st century will do without attack drones? North Korean drones have traditionally received the poetic name of the Morning Star. Both drones are used for reconnaissance, but Satbel-9 can still strike ground targets. It is equipped with 10 air-to-ground missiles, a wingspan of 20 meters and turbo propeller engine with a pusher air propeller. The Satbel-4 is much larger, with a wingspan of 35 meters and complete with a turbojet engine and all sorts of reconnaissance equipment. How capable is the Army of North Korea? It is really strong, although it lags behind in terms of quality. But in case of necessity, it will be able to resist its offenders. The technical backwardness of the Korean People's Army is compensated by its numbers, high level of combat training and fanaticism of the personnel. Each of the fighters will give his life for the motherland without hesitation. We should not forget about the terrain. North Korea is dominated by mountainous terrain, which the PRC military uses in case of war. All this together makes the North Korean army dangerous even for the 3 strongest armies in the world. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Give it a like and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.